Welcome to Watch the Booker Man, and as well as waiting on a few decisions as we come into this episode, I am going to also start negotiations with a few other people. Now, with Jimmy Hart being officially confirmed as the commissioner of Saturday Night Worldwide on the upcoming episode of Saturday Night, I wanted to make sure that when he does start and lay down his law, he does have a few new talents to work with on that roster. Now, I did say about people putting suggestions in, and I'm going to be honest, I'm recording this before the episode that I'm talking about comes out, so if anybody hasn't made any suggestions, they will be taken on board for future, but for now I'm just signing people who I just think fit that. They're interesting, the people we can develop and work with, but they're not going to be the major names that you expect to be debuting on Nitro. So I'm starting with Johnny Swinger, and we're just going to do 6-month deals for these guys. I think I will go exclusive. Will I go exclusive? Because is it better for him to get... I'm going to just do written for the first 6 months and see how that does essentially. I will go per month because I just think it's fair if you're doing a written deal to go per month, especially when I think we probably can afford to do that. And his partner, Simon Diamond, now two relatively young workers, plenty of potential, and as you can see with Simon Diamond, a couple of people on the roster will be basically happy to see him in the company, so looks like it's going to be an all-round good couple of signings there. Effective heels, they can work well as a lower card heel team, and I think over time, through the years, as our tag team division develops, we will see them rise up the ranks eventually, but for now, they're going to be tried out on Worldwide Saturday Night, and we're also going to make a contract offer to Christopher Daniels, and because he's one of the sort of top young prospects on the indie scene, I am going to actually go for a 1-year deal for him and sign him to... No, I am just going to go written again. Sorry, I probably should have thought this part through before I actually ran through everything, but we're not going to cover his travel. I did mean to do that for Swinger and the other guy, but I didn't. And I'm also going to go for probably the biggest name that we're debuting on this show, somebody who I think has huge amounts of potential, and I think quickly we will see him on that main roster or on Nitro. But again, I think a 1-year exclusive written contract. I'm considering this more a proper signing than sort of the Saturday Night signing. It's just a case that there's probably not time to showcase him on Nitro just yet, so it'll be a good way to build him up in the Cruiserweight division, and I see him as potentially the next Cruiserweight champion. I do have one or two people in mind who I think could take that title from Sugar Shane, and Kid Cash, despite not yet being signed, is certainly up there in that. I am now going to go through the week. Hopefully we can get that deal for Andrew Tess Martin over the line, because I think the idea that I've got for him and Christian Cage coming in, as I've sort of said before, together is a really interesting one. I will just keep a track, of course, of any news that comes in that may or may not be interesting, but there it is. We are now going to canvass opinion on this. Nobody has anything negative to say for Tess, and it's a pretty big contract, but he is somebody who, despite not quite getting there in real life, I think at 26 years old, a 4-year deal, without the benefit of hindsight, I think you'd be saying this is an absolute great deal for WCW. Somebody who was probably held back because I don't know what the so-called politics were with Triple H, but they seemed to be something that maybe they were too similar or whatever it was. He's somebody who, away from the WWF at this time, has plenty of potential, and I think when he did eventually leave the company and go to TNA and whatnot, it probably was a little bit too late for him to be that top star, and for whatever reason WWE kept him around for quite a while, because I think they did see there was definitely that potential in him. Simon Diamond and Kid Cash, absolutely delighted to be coming into the company. Only a couple of days it took them, so that's definitely a good sign, and a 2-year written exclusive contract for Steve Corino. Now, I'm interested as to whether that prompts the NWA companies to take the championship off him, or whether, because we're in that alliance, it will still be okay. I'm noticing I'm signing a hell of a lot of heels here. Christopher Daniels is going to have to be brought in as a babyface, I think, because I'm already balanced more heavily towards heels than faces, I think, so it's definitely going to be something we maybe need to redress. I know I'm trying to turn the Young Dragons face. There might be another low-level tag team in there, perhaps 3 Count. I will show now on screen, and if anybody sees anybody who they particularly think is due for a face turn, then again, let me know, and I would be interested to hear that. But yeah, quite a lot of heels on the roster compared to baby faces. We're just 4 nights away from Nitro now, and this week, like I said, we will be doing Nitro first and then Worldwide. I just find that it flows easier. It makes my booking easier because I've got Nitro 1710 written up on a Google document here, so I can just put that straight in, and then when we go into the booking analysis screen on Saturday Night Worldwide, I'll have everybody who hasn't been used tonight, and then that means that I can build the show around making sure that all those guys are involved as well. It's just my preferred way of doing it. Sabu sent home, that's interesting because he is somebody who I have my eye on for coming in quite sort of soon. I've got a big plan for him, but obviously he's a soft drug user. What is it that he's been sent home for? Yeah, painkillers. So hopefully something that doesn't rear its head if we do decide to bring him in. Daniels, again, I do think he's probably better as a heel, but we will, because he's going to be a rookie upstart sort of character, I think we will be okay. Alan Funk, I didn't realise we didn't have him on an exclusive deal, is going touring with the WWA. Risky move considering I'm already questioning his future, and these house shows getting 500 and odd people there. It's not working out quite so well, is it? But all good. We will continue to go through, and this will be the final signing that I make. Stevie Ray coming in, his brother, of course, Booker T. Happy with that. He is going to be our colour commentator on Saturday Night Worldwide. We did have Arn Anderson doing it, but I just don't necessarily think it's a natural fit for him. And watching WCW in 2001, they did seem to be putting him in that position on Thunder and whatnot, so I do think this is a good position for him and somebody who never went to WWF, so I'm, again, interested in people. As much as I'm interested in going what could have been if Test jumped to WCW, I also think there's an interest in people who were never in WWF. Kane replacing Eddie Guerrero in the Radicals, that is absolutely brilliant. I love this game so much. And here we are at WCW Nitro. I'm not giving anybody the night off. We don't tend to do that. The Huntington Civic Centre, I don't think is the one that it normally sends us to. So, yeah, I'll let it put us in the Mid-Atlantic for this show. I don't have any issue with that. Pick the best venue. And then we'll go to the booking team meeting. Now, we've got plenty of stored ideas at the minute, so we've got 2 creative finishes. I probably need to use one of them tonight in our main event. I'll have a look what our main event's meant to be fair. Yeah, I guess that can be used as the creative finish. We need to use some of these ideas, so I'll go for another angle idea, because it's always good to have a couple of angles on the show that can be boosted up. And then I'll go for we'll discard that, and I'll go instead for a character idea. I do like character ideas. I think that might be used on maybe Hugh Morrus. I'll check who I've used the other ones on before, and then we'll use a storyline idea. That's a bit of a gamble. Yeah, I'm not taking risks at this stage of the game, as I've said before. The locker room incidents, Billy Silverman arguing with Sean O'Hare. I'd have just backed down if I was him. Heated arguments. Nice. Tommy Dreamer's got an angle idea. Kanyon's got a storyline idea, so some good in amongst the bad there. I will right click, I've got no interest in doing that, but I will see who we can use this character idea on, and I'm probably going to try and find somebody who's not happy, to be fair. Morale, any negative, and I think, I didn't know, what's Billy Kidman annoyed about? He's annoyed that he caused an injury, so he's probably going, don't make sense, if he causes another injury, then he's going to quit the company. Is that what we're saying? Buff Bagwell's annoyed again. I think we've already given him a successful character idea. He's just remembering that he was upset about that match that he lost about. I don't even remember who he lost to. Chavo's annoyed that he got injured, so fair enough. Fit Finlay, I'm not that bothered about. He's unhappy that his heel turn went badly. Creative idea, we will use this character idea on Kanyon. Didn't I try and use one of these last week and it went badly? I need to just double check his morale here, because surely 2 in a row won't go badly. It says likely to succeed. It was a success. He's still annoyed, but it's got to do something, I think. And he's got 5 positives and 2 negatives, so I think he needs to focus on the good side here. But again, there was pre-booked matches on this show. Hack and Dreamer, Juventud and Super Crazy, Road Warriors and Romeo and Skipper, and Billy Kidman, Lance Storm and Mike Awesome, but I was just too lazy or too distracted to put it in. There we go. Be back on the other side with a hopefully impressive episode of WCW Nitro. So I've assigned a couple of our creative ideas tonight, and I'm just going to look through the others to see if there's anything I think is worth doing. I mean, Booker T character idea, we could do that anytime, so I might do that. Diamond Dallas Page and Dustin Rhodes haven't been in their storylines long enough, and Dustin Rhodes' idea is extremely risky for his character, so I'm not going to do that. And the other 2, I don't think we can use the storyline idea yet. And Tommy Dreamer, well, it makes sense he'd be coming up with something pretty risky, but we're going to avoid doing that for tonight and just get into Nitro as I have booked it, and hope that creative finish on the main event does give us 1 or 2 extra points, because I'm not 100% sure that we are going to, again, reach that 65 threshold on tonight's show. And we start well with a really good promo. Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page and Dustin Rhodes come to the ring, vowing to watch each other's backs now that we know all about the plans of Big Van Vader and Kurt Hennig and their new partner Chris Kanyon. they don't need or want to know the reason why this trio have come together. They're just going to make sure that DDP has backup when he faces Curt Hennig in tonight's main event. Now, last week, Curt Hennig pinned Diamond Dallas Page in that tag team match with Big Van Vader and Curt Hennig versus Diamond Dallas Page and Dustin Rhodes. But there was the caveat, of course, that Kanyon got himself involved. Coming out from the back, the three men stand at the top of the ramp, the heels we're talking about now. Kanyon taking the lead and saying that there's a lot wrong with what these guys have been saying already tonight. But in particular, they point out that they have nothing to do with something that Dustin Rhodes mentioned, and that is the attack on his father last week. Kanyon says that they might not want to hear how the three of them came together, but Kanyon is going to explain exactly how he architected this and took these two men from under the wings of Jimmy Hart. DDP tells Kanyon to do everybody a favour and shut up before the people watching this show switch their television sets off, and frankly, these people can't leave, so do everybody a favour, shut your mouth and come down and fight us. Curt Hennig takes over from there, however, saying that that's not going to happen. Page can wait until the main event to get another beating at the hands of him. So a decent segment. Kanyon apparently performing poorly, as did Dustin Rhodes, but it's a good angle to advance what I've just called main event storyline because I couldn't think of a better name for it, and we do gain heat there, so very happy with that. Cutting to the back, we see Big Van Vader, Curt Hennig and Kanyon heading through the curtain. This after a little interlude from the commentators, formally introducing us to the show. We see Crowbar and Jet waiting to confront their mentor, Kanyon, and his new associates. Crowbar asked Kanyon what the hell is going on. He knew there'd been fractions between them, but what's his explanation for this? Kanyon's explanation is to deck Crowbar where he stands. Kanyon does spare Jet, however, and Jet's checking on his partner, but Kanyon lets him know he has a decision to make and he's not going to have very long to make it. I did hope that that would advance the Generation of Innovation storyline. I'm not sure why it didn't, because it does have Jet, Crowbar and Kanyon in it, but oh well, it wasn't a very good segment anyway, so I'm not going to complain too much. A decent match opens the show as Juventud Guerrera defeats Super Crazy in 7 minutes and 49. Relatively cleanly, it's a high spots match. It's just about showcasing their ability, two of the best cruiserweights that we've got. But, of course, Juventud does take shortcuts, cheats where he can in the match, but it's not a case of there being any outside interference or anything like that. After the match, though, as Tajiri checks on his partner in the ring, he is met with disrespectful boots to the head by Psicosis and a bit of a post-match beatdown, really, from Lucha Royale. Running out from the back, Sugar Shane makes the save, ensuring that Lucha Royale leave the ring, and Tajiri is relatively unscathed. Super Crazy obviously feeling the effects of the match. Sugar Shane says that he's sure Tajiri will be more than happy to face Psicosis next week if that guy's looking for a fight, but he has a message for the other member of Lucha Royale, Juventud Guerrera. Halloween Havoc, Cruiserweight Championship. Sugar Shane's going to defend against Juventud Guerrera, and I think that may well be the best match of his title reign so far, and one that I'm really, really looking forward to before we transition the Lucha Royale guys into something else that I've got for them, which I think is going to be really, really interesting. Dustin Rhodes is then shown in the office of Shane McMahon. The man in charge says that he knows he's got a lot on his plate with Kanyon and his crew, but he has managed to obtain security footage from the venue they were at last week, and Kanyon was telling the truth. It wasn't them who attacked his father Dusty. He then shows Dustin Rhodes footage on a monitor, which the viewers can't see. Shane McMahon shows Dustin Rhodes exactly who was behind that attack on his father, and of course Rhodes flips out. He can't believe who's done this to his dad, who again isn't here tonight because of that attack. He storms out of the office, vowing that he's going to kick that guy's ass, and of course that's a little bit of a tease that hopefully keeps people interested for something that is coming a little bit later on in the show. The commentators discussed the return of the Road Warriors last week on WCW Nitro. They defeated the World Tag Team Champions in Chicago, the first defeat the Natural Born Thrillers have suffered since the return of WCW. Footage is shown of the one-sided match. The commentators putting over the legendary team's upcoming title shot at Halloween Havoc. The Road Warriors will also be in action later tonight against Elix Skipper and Kid Romeo after they basically put their foot in it last week, and they're going to have to face the consequences later tonight. We then get the match put together by Jerry the King Lawler last week. Of course, Tommy Dreamer, his jester, being forced to face Hack in an Extreme Rules match now after a handshake. They don't really care about having to get into it. They are hitting each other with weapons, just fighting as they would anybody else, because basically they've done it before, they'll do it again. Hack and Dreamer may be aligned, but it doesn't mean there won't be times when they have to beat the crap out of each other. Now, basically, Hack takes control in the end of the match, but after about 6 minutes, it probably would have gone quite a bit longer than this, but Brian Lawler and Sir Nelson Knight run in and attack Hack as he appears to be taking control of the match. Dreamer is down and gets dragged across Hack after a big splash from Sir Nelson Knight and a diving leg drop from Prince Brian Lawler. I'm just imagining the absolutely contrast between these two gritty, hardcore wrestlers having a bit of a garbage match, and then Brian Lawler coming out in a crown and doing that daft diving leg drop after a big splash from Sir Nelson Knight. I just think the juxtaposition of this storyline, I'm enjoying it. I think it's working really well. But Dreamer gets dragged over Hack, so this is the Jester. He's not had that good of a win-loss record since coming to WCW, and now he's with the King's Court. He actually gets a win over his friend, but of course it's angle-based, storyline-based, rather than the actual wins and losses mattering. Now, with the two Extreme Outsiders down on the canvas, Jerry Lawler comes strolling out from the back, and he's being very arrogant, telling the fans to shut up, just basically healing up as he very much is an expert at. Now, this is a pretty poor segment considering that I think it's mainly just based on Jerry Lawler cutting a promo, but he says that he had to put a stop to that embarrassing match. That was basically going to be a black mark on the history of WCW if he carried on letting them two attempt to fight. That what we just saw simply wasn't wrestling. All Jerry has been hearing for weeks is that Hack wants to fight the King, and Lawler thinks that Halloween Havoc would be the perfect chance for Hack to once again butcher an attempt at being a professional wrestler. That's why he will fight Hack at that show, but it's not going to be in this Extreme Rules environment they've created. It'll be in a straightforward wrestling match. He plans to expose Hack to the world. However, since Hack couldn't even get through his jester, Tommy Dreamer, he will have to beat Prince Brian Lawler and Sir Nelson Knight in a handicap match next week if he wants the chance at getting his hands on Jerry the King Lawler. Then whatever happens after that, whether it's a bit more of an attack or just Jerry Lawler humiliating these two men, I do think we've got a really strong dynamic in this storyline, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build it through the weeks and months. This is something that started obviously very, very early on with small seeds on commentary of Jerry Lawler disparaging these guys. This is a storyline that runs all the way to Starrcade, and I think when we look back at the full arc of this, it's going to be a storyline that's probably my favourite that I've done so far. Billy Kidman is interviewed about facing Lance Storm and Mike Awesome in a three-way tonight. He might be the underdog going into tonight's match, but it isn't the first time that he's been that, and it was only a couple of months ago that he was in a match with Mike Awesome and Lance Storm, and he pinned Storm 1-2-3. What's more, he can see the desire to become a champion in the eyes of Mike Awesome, and he questions whether Team Canada can truly trust one another when the bell rings tonight. An absolutely shocking promo from Billy Kidman. Note to self, continue to keep a microphone away from him wherever possible. Returning from the break, we see Dustin Rhodes storming through the back, convinced that he has finally tracked down the person who took his father out. However, when Dustin Rhodes barges his way into the room that he believes that this person is in, he is stopped in his tracks by Bob Sapp, standing up from a bench in the corner. Steve Corino tells Dustin Rhodes, yeah, he's damn right. He is the man who took out his father, and he's not been hiding from that fact. He says that Dustin knows exactly why he did what he did. He wants Dustin to take another step, go for it, and he will feel firsthand what happened to his father just 7 nights ago. Dustin is fired up, but Bob Sapp is basically able to restrain him, and Dustin tells Corino that when he gets his hands on him, he's gonna kick his ass. Corino laughs it off and says that he will meet Dustin alone in the parking lot later tonight. No Sapp, none of Dustin's buddies, and he can see just what he did to his old man in person last week. So he's saying he beat up Dusty Rhodes last week, and he's going to beat Dustin Rhodes up in the same manner this week, and it's just going to be the two of them, no outside shenanigans. We then give an unscripted promo to Skipper and Romeo, because I just wanted these two cocky young guys to basically try and get the fans to hate them in 60 seconds so that it leads to a big pop for Road Warrior Animal and Road Warrior Hawk coming out. So yeah, a simple task. It's not a good segment, but I do feel like it would have done the job that when the Road Warriors came out, the fans were delighted to see them, and it's pretty straightforward. Another 3-minute match, another victory for the Road Warriors with a Doomsday device. Barely any offense from Romeo and Skipper outside of the first minute or so of the match. A complete one-sided squash. The commentators put over the World Tag Team Championship match at Halloween Havoc as the Road Warriors celebrate on the turnbuckles. The champions then come out, and we even tease that they're contemplating an attack on their upcoming opponents. However, when the natural born thrillers are face to face with the Road Warriors, they instead offer a hand of respect to them. Instead of accepting the gesture, though, the two men make it clear they're only here for one thing, not respect, not to try and make friends with this new generation. They're here for the titles. When the Road Warriors leave up the ramp, celebrating with their fans, the champions turn their attention to Romeo and Skipper, taking out their frustrations. Chuck Palumbo drops Skipper with a super kick, Sean O'Haire, Romeo with a spinebuster, and then they stack them up, and it's a Sean Torn bomb for good measure. So the champions stand tall, but Road Warrior Animal and Road Warrior Hawk very much under their skin, and we were sort of teasing the idea there that now that they finally lost, the Natural Born Thrillers might decide to go the low road, but as we see, they decided against that in the end. We then get a video package that recaps why Lance Storm is having issues with the man in charge, going back to when Shane was the special guest referee when Lance Storm lost his title to Rob Van Dam. He is then interviewed with Mike Awesome about their upcoming match with Billy Kidman. Storm says tonight's match is completely unnecessary, but if this is what it takes to make right the injustice of his defeat to Rob Van Dam last month, then so be it. Storm is going to put an end to this so-called dream match talk, because Halloween Havoc will be a nightmare for Rob Van Dam when Lance Storm takes his title. He says that he and Mike are on the same page, and that is that Lance Storm is owed his championship back, and they're going to stop at nothing to make that happen. Lance Storm then walks off, with Mike Awesome grabbing the microphone from Scott Hudson and yelling the United States Championship is coming back to Team Canada. So perhaps what he means by that is open to interpretation, but we'll see as it is the next match. We then head to the parking lot where we see Dustin Rhodes tentatively making his way through the cars, looking for Steve Corino, of course. He is suspicious of the King of Old School's claim, but he does eventually spot Steve in the distance. Corino invites him to come and get some. He's ready to fight. He's taping up his wrists and he is ready for a brawl. However, as Dustin reaches just feet away from Corino, the predictable thing happens. It's a setup as Bob Sapp jumps the son of the American Dream. Dustin is thrown into the bonnet of the car, and we can see this really hurts his back, and then Corino picks the bones and lays into him, shots into the head that we saw him do to David Flair that busted him open. Rhodes does valiantly attempt to fight back, but he's incapacitated from his back injury, and it's all just too much for him. The fight ends with Steve Corino throwing Dustin Rhodes head first into the side window of a parked car. It smashes the glass and obviously busts Dustin Rhodes wide open. We see him slumped up against another car in the parking lot with blood gushing down his face. Steve Corino and Bob Sapp leave the scene, and we return to ringside with the commentators putting over the severity of that attack. Medical personnel are on their way to check on Dustin Rhodes right now, but the storyline Who Attacked Dusty will be renamed because, well, it's not a mystery anymore, but it gains heat and very much transitions Dustin Rhodes into a rivalry with Steve Corino. The angle idea was a success, and I'm hoping that this can really help us build Steve Corino up the card, a very, very well-established member of the roster, and it takes Dustin Rhodes away from the main event storyline because I want to slot somebody else in there as the third person in the fight back against Kanyon's group, as it were. Obviously, we're going to follow that up. A really great match here now. Billy Kidman defeats Lance Storm and Mike Awesome in 12 minutes and 20, pinning Lance Storm with a shooting star press, and the idea is that it's a miscommunication between Mike Awesome and Lance Storm that results in Mike Awesome accidentally taking Lance Storm down. He then tries to powerbomb Billy Kidman, who Hurricane runs him out of the ring, then heads to the top rope and hits the shooting star press. A shock victory for him. Lance Storm carrying the match and Billy Kidman the weak link. He really isn't doing that well in his current role, Billy Kidman. Promos and in ring hasn't been that good, but we are doing that quote-unquote dream match with Rob Van Dam, and he is actually the only man other than Rob Van Dam who has pinned Lance Storm since the start of this save, so seems to be the Achilles heel of the former champion. Billy Kidman celebrates his victory after the match and heads up the ramp. It's even a 33 just for his celebration, so he's really not very good, and tension rises between Lance Storm and Mike Awesome, Storm blaming Mike for the defeat, but when Awesome stands up for himself, Lance backs down. He obviously doesn't want to get on the wrong side too much of his enforcer, shaking his head. Storm says that all of this is ridiculous. He knows exactly what's happening here. They shouldn't be arguing with each other. This is what Shane McMahon wants. It's what he's wanted from day one. He wants to come between them, and Lance is not going to make that happen. He and Mike are going to go together to go and see Shane McMahon right now. Lance tells Mike they're going to see Shane right away. We then get an interview in the back after the break, perhaps with Booker T, asked about the potential implications of tonight's main event on his title defense at Halloween Havoc. Booker T says that Diamond Dallas Page had 7 straight wins going into last week's match, but he has to get a win back over Kurt Hennig tonight if he wants a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship, especially considering it was Kurt who pinned him last week, and if Hennig wins tonight, that'd give him 6 straight wins on WCW Nitro. That makes it hard to argue against him getting a shot at the World Heavyweight Championship, especially beating a former champion 2 weeks in a row. Walking into the interview set, Kanyon and Big Van Vader look to intimidate the champion. They say that Hennig winning is exactly what's going to happen tonight, and if Booker T had any brains about him, he'd stay away from ringside tonight. Booker T, of course, isn't going to take intimidation from anybody, much least Kanyon, setting up that there's going to be outside involvement in the main event, isn't there? And it's essentially a unofficial number 1 contendership match for Halloween Havoc. A promo then airs for Jimmy Hart's first episode of Saturday Night Worldwide this Saturday on the USA Network. The new commissioner of the show just doing his over-the-top promo in a way that only Jimmy Hart can do, so I'm not going to try and go into what he'd be saying, but he promises new faces showing up this Saturday night on the USA Network, and nobody is going to want to miss it. Returning to ringside, the commentators confirm that as well as that, there'll be obviously great in-ring action, but the show will also feature an in-depth interview with Hugh Morrus. He'll sit down with Mike Tenay, or he did sit down with Mike Tenay early this week, and he will explain his recent actions to that man, the Laughing Man, of course, now the Angry Man. Unfortunately, I didn't really have space for him on Nitro. I initially put like a 1-minute vignette in, but I thought I might as well give him 3 minutes on Saturday night where we do have that time to let him tell his story, then rush something on tonight's show, so that's why that decision was made. It's a shame because, of course, Hugh Morrus, it's a fresh off a heel turn and then he's not on Nitro, but he's at least mentioned here, and what I've got planned for him into November, I think he's going to be a big part of this show, and of course the company going forward. I think a very, very good heel as somebody who I actively dislike. We then see Rob Van Dam entering the office of Shane McMahon, and Billy Kidman is already there speaking with the man in charge. Shane saying, well done on your victory. Who'd have seen that coming? He beat Lance Storm and Mike Awesome. RVD congratulates Billy on his win also, saying that he's looking forward to finally facing off with him at Halloween Havoc. Kidman puts over again, it's always him who's pushing this idea that it is gonna be a dream match. Storming into the office, Lance Storm flips out. He's got Mike Awesome in tow. He blames Shane McMahon for all of this. That match shouldn't be taking place at Halloween Havoc. It should be his rematch. Lance gets in the face of Shane McMahon, and it's so intense that Shane's had enough. He gets up, he almost flips his table, and he makes it clear that he's going to lay hands on Lance if he doesn't shut his mouth. And a little bit unprofessional here. Shane's done a good job of sort of keeping his cool throughout the few months of WCW being back, despite a lot of people getting under his skin. But actually it is Lance Storm who, for some reason more than anybody else, perhaps his staunch anti-US stance, that really just gets under his skin. Lance Storm uses this against him as Shane is calmed down by Kidman and Rob Van Dam. He's shaking his head and saying this is another example of why Shane isn't fit to run this company. He is going to take matters into his own hands, and Shane is going to regret mistake after mistake that he's been making. So really just setting up for a future thing. But so really not too much coming out of this, but it's just the moment that Shane McMahon snaps, absolutely sick of Lance Storm BS. We then get a quick segment before the main event. The commentators recapping the attack that Dustin Rhodes suffered at the hands of Steve Corino. I didn't just want to do the segment and forget about it because it was so severe. It was only the second time that we've used blood on Nitro, and the first time was when Steve Corino attacked David Flair. So kind of trying to make it his USP that he is perhaps the most brutal and violent member of the roster. We also see footage of Dustin Rhodes being loaded into an ambulance, as his father Dusty was last week, so parallels there, but Steve Corino hopefully coming across as the bastard that he is, despite it being a 34 rated segment, but hopefully in terms of the perfect show theory, that brings the crowd down as the main event. Oh dear. So I think we're going to be okay in terms of overall rating. I hope so, because the creative finish was a success. But Diamond Dallas Page has suffered broken ribs, and that makes me think he's not going to be fit to compete in 2 weeks. Now, the booking of the match, Kanyon and Big Van Vader come out and get involved. Booker T comes out, and then Rob Van Dam comes out and sort of gets rid of Vader and Kanyon. This then leads to some sort of distraction where Curt Hennig is hit with a diamond cut. To be fair, it's a clean win for Diamond Dallas Page over Curt Hennig in the end. It's just that Booker T and RVD have to come out to counteract Big Van Vader and Kanyon, and then because their plan has now backfired, Curt Hennig is sort of vulnerable to the diamond cutter. Now, I wish it would have said about Dallas Page being injured and then perhaps giving me the option to change the booking, but it looks like he might, because it's not stopping me going into this next segment, so he may be okay, gaining the victory thanks to the backup of RVD and Booker T. DDP's holding his ribs, selling his injuries, but thankfully he has got the victory. The two current champions in the company. DDP then begins to discuss something with them as Kanyon and Vader help Curt Hennig up the ramp, so a little bit of a shine taken away from this new trio. But I do have, again, next week's booking, I think will get them back up there in terms of being the serious heels they were. And they've had good booking for the last couple of weeks, so I think we're going to be okay. It says RVD appears to be hurting the brawl there. We'll just change that to DDP. And I'd even argue that maybe we say that Booker T's cutting this brawl instead of DDP, because DDP, I'd imagine, will be struggling for breath with broken ribs. DDP says that Booker T and RVD are fired up and ready to fight. So how about next week? I mean, it's probably not going to happen now, but Booker T, RVD and DDP against Big Van Vader, Curt Hennig and Kanyon, regrouping at the top of the ramp. Kanyon takes a microphone from ringside and tells the faces, "You've got it." So a big main event set for next week. I'm thinking it might now be Billy Kidman who's put in there as the third man. Can't really think, I mean, Dustin Rhodes can't do it because we've sort of written him off with that attack. So yeah, I think that'll probably be Billy Kidman who takes DDP's spot, but we do end this week's show a 70, so I did underestimate. Did we have a really good segment in there somewhere? Yeah, so the opening segments probably helped us out massively there, and then the main event was okay, to be fair. Other match that was very good being Billy Kidman's victory over Storm and Awesome. Yes, so a really good show there overall. Actually, we have no more locker room incidents. Thankfully, we will address the locker room and now go to book WCW Saturday Night Worldwide. I would like to see if I can look on the medical screen just yet. It might not let me at this time of day, but it looks like Diamond Dallas Page can work through broken ribs. He's due to return October the 8th, so it's like 3 weeks that he's going to be out for. I think probably the plan was DDP and Curt Hennig and Booker T in a triple threat for the world title at Halloween Havoc. Obviously the booking being that they've both pinned each other once, and then there'll be the 3-on-3 next week where neither of them are involved in the fall, but we eventually get to the point of it being a triple threat. I think I will now just write DDP off for the few weeks, and I know he can work through it, but his performance will be worse, and I do think you probably risk aggravating it further if you use him. So yeah, I do think that I will not be booking DDP in action for the next few weeks. I might do, I might not, we'll see basically, but I will now get into booking Saturday Night Worldwide, Jimmy Hart's debut show, so hopefully the new faces that we see will make the show interesting to see. So Saturday night is now in the game, and I'm going to be a bit looser with the format of this. I'm doing a lot of improvised segments and just stuff that I'm giving a general idea of. I don't want to go too into detail with everything that happens on Saturday night. You can see that the only person not used in some capacity tonight is Dusty Rhodes, and that is of course because he is written off. Again, I could have used him in a road agent capacity, but he's one of the few people on the roster on a per appearance deal, so we might as well save that money considering we've lost money every single month since the save started. The other thing you can see there is Shawn Stasiak is not happy with the booking of the main event, but Shawn Stasiak shouldn't be happy with the way he's been booked, so I'm just going to let that be something that goes against his morale. It is what it is. Jimmy Hart opens the show with a good promo, introducing viewers to Saturday Night Worldwide. He says, as well as that new announced team, we have a huge main event set up. Johnny the Bull and Vito will face the Peaks of Perfection. He continues to promote this show with enthusiasm, as much enthusiasm as one can possibly have for Johnny the Bull and Vito versus the Peaks of Perfection, when Buff Bagwell, who I haven't even put on screen, comes out from the back. An absolutely brilliant start there, isn't it? Buff says that now Jimmy Hart is in a position of power and he's signing new faces to WCW worldwide. How about another contract is given out to Buff Bagwell? Buff sells his case based on his hard work and his series of victories in recent weeks, but Jimmy says that a deal with the numbers that Buff will be looking for would have to go through Shane McMahon. However, he will give Buff the chance to prove himself worthy of that offer from Shane tonight. How better to get himself in the shop window than with a match against David Flair later tonight? So not the result Buff Bagwell was after, but just getting his face not out there, but should have been out there. And, well, Buff Bagwell not there, but Jimmy Hart did a good enough job without it. We then get a match that I knew would get a pretty poor rating, and it is only 4 minutes and 36 when Pete Gas and Rodney come out and attack the Young Dragons. This was as a result of the crosswords that they had in the backstage area last week, so they win by DQ, but 3 Count are not happy with Rodney and Pete Gas, understandably, and get into an argument with them, and Jimmy Yang and Kaz Hayashi can get back to their feet, drop kick the heels out of the ring, and this does complete their face turn. I do think they're better as faces overall anyway. Poor segment, but it gives Rodney and Pete Gas something to do. It gives Yang and Kaz Hayashi a new lease on life after some pretty poor booking. Johnny the Bull and Vito then promote their match later tonight, and Reno stood beside them, just arms folded, looking intimidating. He is confronted by Mike Sanders, who, well, he's on behalf of Peaks of Perfection as well, but saying, what the hell is going on here? He was wrong with them. And then he dropped them without word or explanation. Don't they deserve to at least know why he's not speaking to them anymore? Vito steps in for the silent Reno, saying this is bigger than anything they were doing. It's bigger than anything between Sanders and Reno. This is about family, and families may bicker and fight, but blood is thicker than water, etc., etc. The usual motif, with basically saying that they've got a message from higher than any of them that means that they're going to have to play it safe for the time being. Hugh Morrus is then interviewed by Mike Tenay, a sit-down interview early in the week, and he cuts an unstable figure as he talks about the reasons for his recent change in attitude, particularly in regard to his view to the fans. He doesn't think that he has changed, and asks Mike to cast his mind back to the first episode of Nitro when those extreme outsiders jumped Lash LaRue and mercilessly took him out again and again until he was out with a neck injury. Over the weeks that followed, they laid out everybody in their path, including Hugh Morrus. And the fans didn't show sympathy for him. They didn't show support and rally behind the man who was standing up for WCW. They cheered as Hack and Dreamer laid waste to some loyal WCW roster members. Hugh once considered himself a leader of this locker room, but he's ashamed of the boys who refuse to stand up against these outsiders. He is ashamed of Shane McMahon for giving them their own extreme playground to fight by their own rules in. And Hugh Morrus, what did he get? He got nothing. He is ashamed, disgusted, appalled by everybody associated with WCW. These people, these so-called fans, delighted in his suffering, and it took a damn commentator to speak out against Dreamer and Hack. Mike then questions him, saying he understands a lot of where he's coming from, but attacking his own friend Lash LaRue, how does that make any sense with what he's just said? Hugh says that Lash is just as bad as the rest because he refused to stand up for himself. That makes him a coward, and Hugh Morrus does not carry passengers. The angry man continuing his storyline here and giving, I think, the obvious answer, but a more in-depth look at why Hugh Morrus decided to turn heel. A solid victory for Buff Bagwell against David Flair in 5 minutes and 5 seconds with a blockbuster, and it's just Buff again doing things the right way, celebrating his win and sending a cheeky call me gesture to Shane McMahon. He wants that new WCW contract. Lash LaRue's interview asked for his reaction to the words of Hugh Morrus earlier. He says he doesn't know what to say about that man that isn't clear for all to see. He's clearly lost his mind. His focus has to be on Kiwi tonight. He doesn't think there's any chance that he's ever going to be friends with Hugh Morrus again. We then get an unscripted promo. It's crap. It's Chavo speaking about the injury sustained against Billy Kidman. He's angry according to the backstage morale thing, so I just thought, go off on Billy Kidman if you want. Vow to be back in the ring sooner than expected, but otherwise say whatever it is that you want to say. Another poor match, but it's worldwide, so it's okay. Lash LaRue defeats Kiwi in 6 minutes and 16, probably the longest match either one of these has had since WCW came back. A Samoan driver in a match that designs the specific story of Lash LaRue building back better from absolute zero. He celebrates an emotional victory after what has been undoubtedly a tough period for him. AJ Styles is then interviewed about his first win, again by Paisley. Jamie Noble is isn't happy and bemoans the new talent coming into WCW. When cutting off this interview, he wants his shot before anybody gets theirs. And you can see here I'm just doing pretty short descriptions for these segments, mainly because I'm short on time, but also I just want to rattle through Worldwide and sort of give you the general idea of what's happening rather than too much. We then get some solid debuts here, a great debut gimmick for Simon Diamond, very good for Johnny Swinger, great for Christopher Daniels, but unfortunately Cash gets a poor rating. Jimmy Hart introduces the new talent at the top of the stage, giving them each time to introduce themselves. Diamond and Swinger putting across their arrogant, cocky tag team, and I think they're going to be a really strong addition to Worldwide. Some guys who can cut promos and work, which is definitely needed, and Christopher Daniels cutting a bit of a rallying babyface promo. And we see Cash throughout the entire segment is getting increasingly impatient. He eventually cuts Daniels off while he's speaking and puts himself over the very arrogant, cocky character that we know Cash to be. I've changed his name mid-segment from Kid Cash to Cash because we've already got Kid Romeo on the roster, so just a simple change that makes things easier when booking the shows, and you don't want two people with the same name like that. Jimmy Hart says he sees what Kid Cash is doing, so instead, next week, Daniels is going to make his debut, Diamond and Swing will make their debut, but he's going to make Cash wait until the week that follows. So not a very good segment there. A lot of people struggling with off script, but it was the idea of doing that sink or swim moment for these new people. Daniel's doing well, which is good to see, as did Simon Diamond and Jimmy Hart. So very happy with that. We then get a hype video package for Nitro. Big Van Vader, Kurt Hennig and Kanyon will face Booker T, Diamond Dallas Page and Rob Van Dam. We then get the Mamalukes defeating the Peaks of Perfection. Mike Sanders is at ringside, tries to get involved, but Reno, just by standing in front of him with his arms folded, is able to stop him. Johnny the Bull and Vito Lagrasso, their first match back as a team in WCW, picking up the victory. But after the match, Mike Sanders confronts Reno for stopping him getting involved, and eventually a huge brawl breaks out. The Mamalukes send the heels packing to the outside, and Vito then attempts to get Johnny the Bull and Reno to hug it out, but when they refuse, there's a bit of a bickering thing in that they're willing to work towards the same goal, but they're not going to be friends like Vito seems to want them to be. When Vito's trying to explain the seriousness of this to them, the heel trio come back, Sanders, Stasiak and Jindrak, laying out the Mamalukes, and that does mean that despite their terrible booking and very, very bad time of it recently, Mike Sanders and the Peaks of Perfection do stand tall to end this episode of WCW Worldwide. So a very, very small bone thrown to them. Speaking of which, Diamond Dallas Page has a broken bone in his ribs. We've made money again on the night. And the popularity recap, we do lose in 2 regions, but not by a full integer. So I'll take that as a positive as we come to the end of this week's shows. WCW Nitro was really good. I was very, very happy with that. Saturday night is just going to be more of the same like that, really. Giving people chances, seeing what sticks, seeing what doesn't work. You might see gimmicks and angles and storylines sort of come out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere. But that's kind of the beauty of having a low-pressure B show, in my opinion. Plenty of new people on the way. The go-home show to Halloween Havoc, a show that I'm really looking forward to in 2 weeks' time. The potential injury to Diamond Dallas Page, throwing spanners into plans there. But hopefully that is an interesting hook for next week's show. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.